Hi everyone, it's Nicoda from ATP All Things Physio and welcome back to the channel. So today we'll be looking at the lateral spinothalamic tract, and before we begin, let's look at the purpose of this tract. So the lateral spinothalamic tract is responsible for conveying sensory information such as pain and temperature from the periphery, so example your skin, your muscles and your joints, to a conscious level in the cerebral cortex. Now we know that the lateral spinothalamic tract consists of three neurons: first order neurons, second order neurons, and third order neurons. So in this diagram, we know that the first order neurons are in blue, the second order neurons are in red, and the third order neurons in purple. So these neurons are referred to as pseudo-unipolar neurons. So what this means is that there is a soma or cell body at the center, and then you have two branches. A peripheral branch, which is responsible to connecting to receptors in the skin, in joints, and in muscle. And then of course you have the spinal cord, the central branch, which connects to the spinal cord. So in this tract, you have where the soma or cell body is found within the dorsal root ganglia of the spinal cord. And then of course you have the peripheral branch and the central branch. So we could kind of see that this is lining up with the diagram. So the peripheral branch, of course, as I said before, connects to receptors in the skin, in joint, and in muscle. So what happens is that it connects to these receptors and it receives stimuli from mechanoreceptors, from thermoreceptors, etc. And then it relays that information to the spinal cord. So the information is transmitted via fast conducting delta A fibers, which are responsible for sharp pain and hot and cold, as well as slow conducting C type fibers. So this would be the one that would send information regarding burning or aching pain. So what happens is the information is transported to the posterior lateral root of the spinal cord. Right, so something that was not mentioned in this diagram, or that was not drawn in the diagram, is the posterior lateral tract of Leser. Now I did not do that because I did not want the drawing to become too complex, but please do take note of it. So the posterior lateral tract of Leser is basically in the back of the spinal cord in this region here. So what happens is, as this first order neuron enters the spinal cord, it enters this tract and it travels upwards one or two segments before it makes synapse with the second order neuron. So that is what the tract is. But like I said, I did not draw it in order to keep the diagram simplified. Right, so speaking about synapse, we have synapses taking place on two areas in the spinal cord. So we have something called the rex lamellae, and this is basically where you have a lot of tracts running that relay the same information, and if you do like a cross section of it, it kind of looks like lamellae, so they named it rex lamellae, right? And so you have substantia gelatinosa, that's one of the names for the name for one of the lamellae, which is rex lamellae 2. And then you have nucleus proprius, which is the name used for rex lamellae 3, 4, and 5. So this is where you have the synapses taking place between the first order neurons and the second order neurons. So as they synapse in either the substantia gelatinosa or the nucleus proprius, or both of them, because you have a lot of sensory information coming in, you have where the second order neuron now crosses or decussates the spinal cord to the other side and runs upwards towards the cerebral cortex. So what happens is that the tract itself, or these tracts running upwards, it organizes itself so that the most medial segments would correspond to the cervical region, while the most lateral segments would correspond to the sacral region. And of course, you know, we have the thoracic and the lumbar regions in there, and they would fall within that range. So as the tract travels upwards, you have where in the medulla oblongata, it joins to the anterior spinothalamic tract and the spinotectal tract to form the spinal lemniscus. And so this spinal lemniscus travels up towards the cerebral cortex, and it terminates in the ventral posterior lateral nuclei of the thalamus. As it does that, it makes synapse with the third order neuron there, which then travels through the posterior limb of the internal capsule and runs along the corona radiata into the cerebral cortex. Of course, we know in the cerebral cortex we have something called the homunculus. And so what this is a diagrammatic representation of the sensory cortex of the brain. So, you know, in the brain, if we take a cross-sectional area between the somatosensory area and the primary motor area, you have where you can have this homunculus, which basically maps how the sensory information is received and relayed within the brain. So what it does, it demonstrates the sensory areas of the brain that correspond to the region of the body it receives. So we have the tongue, the face, the eyes, fingers, hands, stomach, feet, etc., etc., right? So that is really what happens in the lateral spinothalamic tract. So let's do an example. For instance, I touch something that is hot, right? And I leave my hand there for a while, so now it starts to burn. We know that the C-type fibers pick up burning sensation. So these receptors in the skin, this information is then picked up and it travels towards the spinal cord. So what it does, it enters the spinal cord. We have the posterior tract of Leser. It crosses over one or two segments above, and then it runs up one or two segments above and then crosses over. And then this information travels up the spine. Since it's my hand, it will be, let's say, it'll be closer to the thoracic region, so it wouldn't be as medial, it'll be a little bit more lateral, and it runs up the tract to the cerebral cortex. And now this information is processed and it is brought to a conscious level, because remember we said that the point of this tract is conveying this information to a conscious level in the cerebral cortex. So now that the information is sent and it's about the fingers, it's about the hand, it reaches a conscious level in the cerebral cortex, and now this information is then sent to the motor control area. So what it does, it will say, yo, tell Nakoda to move her hand from there because she will get burned. We are picking up a burning sensation, so she has to move her hand immediately and in order not for her to get burned. So I'll pull back my hand from that. So that's basically what the purpose of this tract. So something to note is that if there's a lesion to this tract, or this tract is cut in any way, you will have loss of pain and temperature on the contralateral side. It's contralateral because remember, as the tract enters, it crosses over. So it's not that the brain is receiving information from the ipsilateral side, it's receiving information from the contralateral side. Yes? So once again, if there's a lesion to the lateral spinothalamic tract, you will have loss of pain and temperature sensations below the level of the lesion on the contralateral side. Yes? Good. So that is the lateral spinothalamic tract. I hope you guys understood the video. I hope you guys have a better understanding of how the tract works. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments and they will be answered.